All right, let's hope this works out. Rumble Studios getting ready to change a lot of their things, and this is one of the other options I'll have, and I suspect it's probably the only one I have for where Super Tip would work in it, because the old one had these the thing they called it ingresses, where you could feed in the uh, the codes and whatnot for it. But there's no option in the new one. So they're saying, hey, they're going to fade it out and all that. So I decided, well, gonna have to do this one. So that's the deal. So I can see there's quite the delay here from what the platform shows me. It's rather significant. So, well, I don't know why it has to be that long. but, but it is. So anyway, I'm gonna finish up on these coloring. These two I've already done some time ago. This is the Tucker Carlson one, and then that one's the Megyn Kelly one. And characters, commentators, whatever you want to call it, have gotten some amount of attention for their sudden shift, I would say, somewhat, in views and whatnot. And it's all rather sad and unfortunate. So, first of all, we'll go with Tucker. He had that show on Fox News and garnered quite the following. And this was kind of, after they had to boot Bill O'Reilly out, they kind of lost their main star for the primetime viewing and whatnot. And Tucker had already started his show, but I think it was on earlier at the time or whatever. And so they put Tucker in the slot. And turns out, not long after that, it really worked out. He garnered quite the audience and was doing quite well. But he was instantly hated by the left, and it was always fun to watch them lose their minds over him and all that type of stuff. And it got to the point where some nuts went to his house and threatened his wife. She hid in a closet or something like that, and he had to move to wherever. No one needs to know. Apparently looking for property in Qatar these days, but nevertheless, that's much later. And, he garnered a lot of sympathy. I mean, that is just awful. It comes to that just because he sits on a show and talks about stuff. And if you don't like it, you don't have to, and you don't have to absolutely want to destroy the man and his family because of it. Well, since then, and then not long after that, Fox gave him the boot, and it was always a bit bizarre. I still really don't know what exactly happened there. They were saying that Rupert Murdoch was personally mad at him. It was never quite clear what happened. I mean, especially since he was, their star primetime host and all that. And that was it. He was gone. And did I just already? I must have done it already. Okay. And so he went independent, and he had a lot of support that way with his own podcast show, what have you. And there you go. And a lot of people, like I said, had a lot of support for his sympathy. Didn't think that was fair, and how he kind of got the boot from Fox News. And all that sort of stuff. And then, of course, all the other things about, this is the future and stuff. That Fox News is basically king of a dying media format and that sort of thing. And that was all the discussions. Since then, though, I took it that he comes from the position of after the Iraq War, and not just Iraq, but the whole War on Terror era, which came to be like 20 years of war that ends in surrender. Yeah, I mean, Afghanistan ends when Biden comes in, and that horrific withdrawal that he did with bodies falling out of the planes and all that. Uh, that's how it ends. And but just the length of it, and so on and so forth, and then of course the Iraq War, it just went sour pretty quick, and to this day, no one has a really full-on explanation for why doing that. So you know the story. Um, and Tucker, of course, I guess perhaps has some guilt in that he was gung ho for it at the time, and takes umbrage that people he had trusted at the time, it would appear, lied to his face. And so it was a working theory that I had that certainly would anger him and whatnot, but kind of messed with his head. And so I said, oh, well, the Iraq War broke him, But it's one of those things where it's like for the longest time, every war, potential war or whatever, was measured in terms of Vietnam. And now since Iraq, every war is Iraq, and so on. This is the sort of thinking that goes in terms of battle and war strategies of the past, where it's always a mistake to try to fight according to the rules of the previous war. Its most famous example is in World War II. The French had set up their defenses based on World War I, and, well, Germany outthought that. And so they immediately lost. So it's one of those things that still applies to in the approach to war. Is like, yes, it's certainly something to consider. There are lessons to learn from it, but you can't paralyze yourself in your own defense in fear that, well, it's just going to be Iraq again. But that's just more or less the position. But the Iraq War happened, and so that's it's not like it's an irresponsible position. It's one to hold, but not to the point of paralysis. But then he goes much further than that. And he'll say again and again, oh, no, I don't really have a problem. But he's gone into everything is Israel. So it's beyond just Iraq War, and it's that to the point that he's making all kinds of claims, and it's embarrassing. Even but he seems to have this relationship with Qatar. He was praising them and had a great place it is, and then came up recently with some story that they had busted a bunch of Mossad agents, and the same he said about Saudi Arabia had. Well, both Saudi Arabia and Qatar said, no, that didn't happen. So, plus, you got to understand the conflict right now with Iran. I says, yeah, I know that everyone involved here, except for Israel and America, are these Muslim countries. But that doesn't mean they're on the same side. It's a very simplistic view of things, and there's a long history that even predates Islam between Arabs, Arab tribes, and whatnot, and Persians, which makes up Iran. And of course, there's since Islam, well, the Iranians, they're Shia Muslims, and the Arab regions are Sunni, and that sort of thing. And then there's always going to be cultural differences, and that's true within the midst of the two factions, whether it's Persians or Arabs and that sort of thing. But nevertheless, that's the case. And increasingly, there was warlike, not just warlike, but absolute war going on between the two. I mean, the Yemeni war was basically a proxy war between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Yeah. And so he was thinking, oh, well, they'll never side with Israel against Iran. Yeah, that's exactly what they're doing. And eventually came to the conclusion that Iran's more of a threat. And so, that's how things happen in war, and unlikely allies come into fruition and all that. So, um, you know, that's the playing game there. So I don't know, he would have to be aware of this, because this is rather old if you paid attention to these sort of things. And he goes off on, there's the boogeyman Israel is everywhere and that kind of thing, with very little to go with other than it's a popular notion. A lot of people believe it, and he runs with it. And that's rather irresponsible for a guy of his stature and career that he had. And other things I had to conclude is maybe it was just because when he was working for networks and shows, he wasn't entirely in charge of his show, and he had handlers and stuff like that. When you're completely on your own, you just go off, and maybe that's part of it. But I don't know. There's not much of an out here to say that, oh well, he got something wrong. It happens, because if it was just isolated to something of that, and well, I heard this or that, and what he heard from, who knows? But you need to rethink your source from now on. Don't know that he will, but you compile it with other elements. The first thing was, during the Ukraine war, and there's a lot of people against it, especially, Biden was president and he had already, the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, and then say, oh, it was time to move on. We're all tired of war, aren't we? Well, yeah. And then, well, we got to do another one. So there was a lot going for that. It's like, yeah, it's too bad about Ukraine, but that kind of thing, Then there's to the point where, Putin's not so bad and all that type of thing. And you can be against the Ukraine war and all that. That doesn't mean that gives one license to cheerlead Vladimir Putin. Now, it's not exactly on the face or in your face that Tucker did his interview with Putin. It was rather lazy and lackluster. He countered him here and there, but ultimately, wasn't much. It was afterwards where he does this almost like he's, a tourism guide or cheerleader for Moscow. And he goes to the grocery store and he's going on about how cool it is, and he does his little laugh and all that. And it was bizarre. And then the idea is like, wow, the capital city of Russia is really, well, even in the Soviet days, they would make damn sure that city was at its best and everything. You go out on the countryside, if you got the chance, it was a different story, but that you're easily that charmed, if he was at all, but that there was some point to be made that, wow, look, we're fighting these guys who aren't really all that bad, and for what, and all this sort of stuff, and which you could make the case, but wow, their country is so much better than ours. Something of that nature, which wasn't really true. And I mean, since then, it's become the quagmire that it is, and Trump comes in saying, hey, I'll end the war. Well, he offered deals. That was a pretty damn good deal. But it's not enough for what Putin must have promised his guys to go into this war, which has obviously lasted much longer than he anticipated. And just the land bridge to the Black Sea and that the Donbass would be territory that Trump was willing to negotiate away despite the anger of Ukraine. But he said, look, this is where we are, and was making deals there where there would be some American support after the fact because there would be American assets within Ukraine for the rare minerals and that sort of thing. And so it makes it a much more difficult prospect of another war down the road. Well, Putin rejected all that and started killing people again. So, if only we'd make a deal and end the war and all that. Well, that's what he was trying to do. So now what do you do? Yeah. Well, he's moved on to Israel and stuff. We won't talk about that anymore. And he goes off there, and then he entertains, Jew conspiracies and all that type of stuff. Has a guy on that just blatantly lies about World War II and all this stuff. About, man, we should have sided with Hitler. He was probably on the right. With the aspect of that Stalin was the bigger threat and all that. Stalin was a threat. No doubt about it. But it's the circumstance and situations you're in at the time. So it's like that you can just wave that away and ignore oceans of detail and omit it to fit your fantasy view of how things go. And that maybe Churchill was the villain and all this sort of stuff. It was irresponsible. And, you can have any guy you want on your show, but when you're talking about something like that and you don't counter any of it, he's like, huh. And I mean, some things, there was some flakiness about Tucker. I mean, he easily bought all kinds of UFO stories. He was doing that while he was still on Fox. And he said, well, there you go. It's proof. It's proven. There it is. And I'm like, there's a bunch of guys saying stuff. There's guys who were in the government and stuff said this happened, but there's no evidence they produce or anything. I mean, it's like UFO stories. They're fun to listen to. It's like ghost stories and stuff, but you're going to make this like another element in your stories of like it's on par with news items about foreign policy or news stories domestically and whatnot, or you're covering a murder trial and everything, and the aliens. Other than the fascination that it's one of the modern myths that people surround around and don't really know. Is it? I mean, maybe. I don't know. That kind of thing. Fine. But to come on there and act like case closed. It's all done. So maybe he was just always a flaky guy, and is he that easily duped by something like that? The other theory is that he's bought by the Qataris, but it's interesting that they kind of turned on him here. Because he was spouting this stuff, and he's become very popular in Iran, at least before, when they could still watch, I mean, don't know what the situation is now after they're being bombed to smithereens and whatnot, but, and just one of the things that never happens in these discussions is the strategic nature and logistics of it all, of the waterways in the area where, the Middle East is, where the Mediterranean and then the Persian Gulf and the Arab Peninsula there and all this stuff. It's ancient waterways, and it's still vitally important for global shipping. And for the past nearly 50 years, Iran's been a constant thorn in the side of not just the United States, but also its Arab neighbors in there. And they can use it for extortion possibilities and with piracy and whatnot. This sort of thing went on and on and on. And it's like, well, let's just break away from it all. Okay, what does that look like? What do you lose? What supplies you just can't quite get anymore? And guys like Tucker never even consider it. I don't even know if he's aware of it. It's never discussed. The other night I saw it on Tim Pool. He almost got it. He was showing it, but he's not as gone and lost as Tucker is. But he's upfront about it. He just doesn't want any wars at all. He knows it's not realistic in every situation, and I understand it. And especially, he's a much younger man than I am, especially people that are really younger that grew up under this war on terror era and how it concluded, more or less. Did it really? But you can understand that of this of the adverse reaction to it, also just the natural adverse reaction to any potential for wars and that sort of thing. But that a lot of corruption happened, and why did it have to drag on as long? Well, there was money in it and stuff like that. Then it's like, well, how could you ever be gung ho, for any kind of, even if you can make a clear defensive argument for it. it's like the appetite just isn't going to be there. And especially even more so after something like that. That doesn't mean it's always going to be the right decision to do nothing. And you have to consider what the consequences, because there's consequences either way. And what would they be? And the Iran situation probably went on much too long in a lot of ways. But, yeah. And then, yes, there are corrupt and wicked people who take advantage of this, and they did. Because it's like I said, the Iraq War, I thought it was a squeeze play on Iran. You got forces in Afghanistan, you got forces in Iraq. Holy crap, you got them surrounded. I guess they're getting ready to make a move. And nah, even when Iran was murdering American troops in Iraq, they did nothing. See, it's things like that. So I can understand the mindset to a point of even someone like Tucker just never trusting any of that again. And yet he's trusting of theories and, whacked out things instantly. So that's why it comes in, well, what game is he really playing? Maybe some. They talk about the numbers you get on the subject matter is rather lucrative for a show like his, and I guess so. But it's really unseemly to do something like that. Now, I liked him. I liked him a lot. He had a good show. He was had a great presence and everything. And it's sad, but at this point, I'll never trust him again. Yeah. But it's a curious and interesting thing. Yeah. Meanwhile, there's Megyn Kelly, who she got screwed. Maybe it seems amicable that when she left Fox, she left them for NBC, and I think NBC is something she wanted to do all along. Maybe saw herself becoming something akin, maybe even Oprah or something like that, and then but it was never going to be that way because she was never going to be able to get rid of the stink of Fox News. And you're going to NBC, that's like enemy territory. And at the time, NBC was flirting with a couple of former Fox News people. And I thought, well, maybe they're trying to, reach the middle and stuff. But when it comes to the left, being a centrist or in the middle of what it means, you're MAGA, and it doesn't matter. Even though she had her tussles with Donald Trump in recent times, she's full on in support of him and stuff like that. But, at the time, they didn't get along all that great at first. But anyway, she got screwed over there because there was just people with the knives out waiting for any opportunity. And, they trashed her, called her a racist and all this stuff, and they booted her out. Regardless of whether or not, I don't know, what ratings was the show doing. I mean, it is NBC. Does that audience, interested? I don't know. But whatever, that was it, all very quickly. And at the same time, like I said, trashed her reputation and all that stuff. And so that's how she learned, well, independent's the way to go. You're on your own, but you got connections and you can network with people. And that's exactly what she did. And it was actually pretty impressive. She rose to the stratosphere of, independent podcasts and news programs. She got a deal with SiriusXM for her show and stuff like that. But ultimately, just having her show on YouTube and the like worked very well for her. And, and she did a variety of stuff, and she actually made a bit of a network of her own. There's other people she brought in, and they do their own shows there. Some veteran news people and some maybe not so veteran, but are good at what they do. And it was impressive. And, so she would cover basic politics and news and stuff, but also true crime and the like and all that. And she did very well with it. Well, The first thing is like she's defensive of Tucker because Tucker was a colleague from Fox News. She's got a lot of respect for him and that sort of thing. And also, he was one who immediately reached out when all the crap happened, and she, got stabbed in the back and booted out and all that sort of stuff. And so that goes a long way, And so he's like a genuine friend of hers. So you can understand that. But the thing of it is what is the argument? So if Tucker's going off on these tangents like that, and he's like, what do you think that is? And she's just not wanting to engage it at all. I mean, you can still say, well, I really like the guy. There's a lot of history there. And, but the question. And it's not enough to just blow it off, but that's what she does, and of course, I'll get to Candace Owens in a minute. But in Tucker's case, she's going to say, hey, look, he's my friend, and I feel rather devoted to him because we went through similar things. We got stabbed in the back by the networks we worked for, and so on. And yeah, there's something to that, but it's not a strong argument for the positions he holds. And what's your take on it? I mean, if you absolutely agree with him, then, well, there's that. At least it'd be something to make some amount of sense to explain your position. But just, no, I don't talk about that or whatever, and that kind of thing. And going on and on ad nauseum about he has the right to say what he said. Yes, he does. Yes, he does. But that's not really the question. And it never really was, in spite of pretending it was. But, so that was the first little thing. And then, of course, Candace Owens. Now, Candace, might as well move on to her drawings. I've done several, and I'm like, man, I mean, this is kind of Megan, but I think the drawings I did of Candace, just most of them weren't that great. So I was like, ugh. Every now and then that happens. There's people who, very recognizable features and stuff, and yet I just can't. Tucker was like that. I did several Tuckers doodling and stuff, and they just like, well, it looks like a guy trying to look like Tucker in some of them. But really, this one was kind of the best one that I've gotten. It's still not quite right. Plus, he looks too young. But anyway, it's tough. Candace, well, it's a little tougher. But Candace went off the deep end some time ago. And this was another one. Because I'd watch her on the Daily Wire. And then they had their big dust up over Israel and, the October 7th attack. And she's going on about, Israel's the real villain and the monsters and they're committing genocide and so on and so forth. And, that was a bridge too far, I suppose. And that's what finally did it. But ultimately, it sounds like nobody liked her there to begin with. Now, on the face of it, had no idea. There was the Kanye West thing, where she was palling around with him. And then he would go off on his day, which he's since apologized for. And he talks about his mental illness, which is blatantly obvious. So he's got that. So I don't know if Candace and him are close anymore, after all that stuff. But the interesting thing about her, and especially in what she does now, is one of the last projects she did besides her own, podcast show for Daily Wire, was this this sort of Daily Wire response to the Stephen Avery case that Netflix had done in their Making of a Murderer series. And the Daily Wire one was, convicting of a murderer. And it was interesting in it because I never really bought that he was innocent. I was kind of left with, I don't know this, but the position of the series was he was. He's being railroaded by this crazy conspiracy by I guess the local sheriff's department there and that sort of thing. And but when you get to the one that the Daily Wire presented, you realize they doctored footage. They lied about his record. They never really, and you kind of wonder, well, why did they suspect him in the first place in the previous murder that he absolutely did not do? He didn't do the original one that he went to prison for. That was someone else who later confessed. And, so it was a fascinating thing. And then, holy crap, now he's convicted again for a very similar crime, except it's I think the first one, the woman was not killed, but in this one, unfortunately, she's dead. And all that is like, God, what are the odds? And, well, they didn't really go into the criminal history of the man, so they hid all that and stuff, and he was a very likely suspect. And so they thought they had the guy. So that explains that, but they didn't want to touch on that. When you're going to be honest about a story, even though it was true, he didn't do that one. He was the wrong guy. But, well, they wanted to play up this, this incredible conspiracy against the guy that this whole department was bent on doing because he had humiliated them, and that's what they were going to do with Mr. Avery. And so through the course of the show, one of the aspects that Candace was doing it, and at least as the host of it, was pointing out how people were married to the conspiracy theory, to the whole thing about he was innocent and there was nothing else to it. You're never going to convince me, and it didn't matter what you told me. And to the point that they were harassing the family members of the woman who died and stuff like that. It was nuts as to how far people would go for that story. And, and Candace was going on, well, it's like cult-like attitudes out there. And it just goes to show you the power of media and whatnot and how it can control and convince people of something. And it only has to do it once, and they'll stay true believers no matter what. And it was all very fascinating. It was very similar to doing a story about cults and stuff like that. And it was well done. And, they had all the actual raw footage of the trial and stuff, and you could compare the two and see how they manipulated some of the testimony to making the officers involved in the case look like absolute monsters and criminals. And then to come to find out that they manipulated the answers where they would show an answer to a different question, but make it seem like it was the answer to another question. And it was like, all right, you're lying. And that's exactly what they did. And all of that just to maintain whatever it was you wanted to present at any cost. It didn't really matter. And ultimately, the producers of it, he said, well, we never said we were journalists or anything. We were just doing, this for the purposes of entertainment. Entertainment. Helping a guy that they had to know. And there was, recordings of them having conversations with Avery and all that, and they're all sympathetic to him. And they had to know. He really did do this, and it was a horrible, horrible murder and rape that he did of this woman who was basically tortured to death. And they're like, yeah, but the story's cooler if he's innocent, so we're just going to pretend he is. Yeah. Now, so Candace is pointing all this out about they're going to stick to their bizarre theory because, hey, it's just more fascinating than the real story. And sticking with it that, oh, well, the powers that be screwed this guy over and everything, and that's the sort of thing that, oh, good Lord, there, but for the grace of God go I. I mean, I could get wrongly convicted and my whole life is destroyed, and I didn't even do it. The madness that something like that, would put you through. And so it's a very powerful sentiment. So you can understand the draw to it of that sort of thing. But it wasn't true. And there's this poor woman who gets lost in all this and largely forgotten, you know, as her death and suffering is made a mockery of by what they did. So, well, we were just trying to be entertaining. You know. So after all that, now Candace comes out and goes full-blown conspiracy theory. Now, initially, she comes out and there's just no doubt. You know, it's just, hey, criticism of Israel is not necessarily anti-Semitic. Well, what exactly is the criticism? Well, it's stuff she just makes up and all that. Then she goes on about Israel was founded by a satanic pedo cult or some crap like that. In between that, she's going after Brigitte Macron, saying she's a dude. So, you know, it was like, oh, geez. And, you know, then people was like, hey, look at those pictures. It's supposed to be her brother, but I don't know. It looks like Brigitte. Never mind the story of Brigitte Macron and, I'm forgetting his name, but Macron, the French president, you know. It's weird enough as it is. She was his school teacher, and they got married. I mean, he was a minor, and, you know. So, but nevertheless, there was somebody started this story about them, and Candace came upon that, and just like, you know what? I'm running with this one. I mean, hey, it's entertainment. Yeah. I mean, she was calling out those people, and rightfully so, you know, in the Avery case. And then she's doing the same thing. Now, granted, it's not as bad as making a mockery of that woman's death, but you're getting close to the territory, and then, oh, well, she kind of does the same thing later when Charlie Kirk was murdered. That, you know, where ultimately she's first, that was supposed to be the Jews. 2 did it. Then she's the Egyptian planes or something. So I guess the Egyptians were in cahoots with them for some reason. And then, the French Foreign Legion, which why the French Foreign Legion would be involved, but that's what she says, because I guess, you know, ultimately it would have to be all about her, you know, because the French don't like her for what she's done to their first lady or what have you, or whatever they call the wife of the president over there. So I guess they have an axe to grind, but it seems like they'd come after her, not, you know, Charlie Kirk. And none of it really makes sense at all. And it was all very stupid. So ultimately, eventually, people talk about this on or to Megan, and he's like, what do you think of that? Well, I don't really know her. And well, you don't have to. And was saying things like, yeah, well, she's a young mother, and I don't, what's that got to do with anything? And so the immediate question comes in, because if this, the same thing with Tucker, if this was someone on the left, she'd rip him a new one over saying stuff like this. And you can't just say, well, but Candace is just a talk show host. You know, she just does her show. If you don't like it, don't watch it. And okay, yeah, but that's not what you do, because there's MSNBC hosts and CNN and stuff, and you will rip them a new one. So it's not just like AOC or somebody like that she would definitely rip a new one. No. You know, it's media personalities too, which is what Candace is. Yeah. So the argument is not a good one, and then ultimately her response is, well, fuck off. Yeah. And doubles down again, and I support her right to do it. Well, yeah, she does have a right. She's not going to go to prison unless she does something criminal, just nefarious or what have you. Lawsuit territory. It is lawsuit territory for defamation and again, what she's doing to Charlie's widow is it's unconscionable. It's absolutely evil. And chasing after weird crap, and that your evidence is based on dreams and crap like that. Then there's all the theories that maybe Candace was in love with Charlie and he rejected her, and that's why she left Turning Point. This is an old grudge and all this, and then suddenly he dies, so she shifts gears from everything else and only deals with the story of his murder, except she doesn't deal with it. She goes off on these weird tangents where it's everybody but the guy who actually did the killing, and so on. And at the time, just ruthless pain. And so the theory would be that she's got an axe to grind with Erica because, well, she won Charlie's heart and she wanted Charlie for herself. Another theory was that she's actually a closeted lesbian and it's obsessed with Erica. I mean, come on. But there's videos of her looking rather tipsy, and some woman is like trying to make out with her and kiss her and stuff. I don't know. But if you were to go with that, that's more than enough metrics to determine that she's, if you follow her metrics of what's proof and not, that's better than say you dreamed it. So, all very bizarre. But, so you can say, well, I don't know. I guess she was always cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs and leave it at that. But that doesn't explain everybody else. Yeah. And, she was a person that people liked, because she had this seemingly conservative show, and a lot of people on the right thought, yeah, she's one of ours, and the takedown she did of Black Lives Matter and what a corrupt thing it was, and that sort of thing. And then, now this, So, it is fascinating to a certain extent, but weird, So anyway, well, that's Candace, and then, but back to Megan, it's still, that doesn't answer the question, and just thinking that you're supposed to be impressed with F-bombs like a 13-year-old. Yeah, it's not going to cut it. Oh, damn it, I screwed that up. So, yeah, she's going to have to, well, she's just not going to explain it because just her own arrogance, I suppose. I don't know. It's strange. But, and all this, well, she's still going about she's a young mother and all this stuff. And then there was the dust up with her and Shapiro, who Shapiro was on the stage with her. I believe that was that at Turning Point? I can't remember. But they were together, and he was going on about, well, Candace is blaming Erica Kirk for the death of her husband. And then Megan's like, what, really? I hadn't heard that. And he says, well, that's the conclusion. And what he means was she was saying that she was condemning at the time. She has flat out said she's a part of it. But at the time, she was going, oh, boy, there's these evil people from top to bottom at Turning Point. Well, Erica Kirk, since Charlie died, is now the CEO of so do the math, so Megan said, oh, well, Ben Shapiro lied. That wasn't true. And burnt that bridge, for someone she doesn't really know. But then she said, hey, I was behind the scenes negotiating the meeting between Erica and Candace and all this. And you people don't know this and all this sort of thing. and actually, Candace and I have become very close, and all this sort of stuff, and like it was all going to be kumbaya and work out, and the rest of you are just making a mountain out of a molehill and looking to grift off this and all that, whatever, you know. Well, since then, how'd that meeting go, huh? Did it really resolve anything? No. Because call her crazy, but it's ultimately evil to do something like that. Yeah, and to the point that she's very much like these conspiracy Avery fans in that documentary that she did. It's almost as if she was taking notes, saying, hey, look how easily these people are duped. Man, I bet I could do that, and I guess she was right, and so there you go. So, who is Candace Owens? Will we ever really know? I guess not. But for Megan to hitch your wagon to that and burn bridges to colleagues he's had for years, for someone she really doesn't know, that she admittedly didn't know, with ridiculous responses that, hey, she's a young mother, you were saying, well, so is Ilhan Omar and stuff like that, and it's like, yeah, you could, and you don't give her any shot or chance, and rightfully so. But nevertheless, it's the points made. It's like the initial said, hey, we got to stick together because the left will overtake us. Sure, to a point, there's always going to be disagreements, even when you're pretty much on the same page on a number of things. But you do have to clean your own house. And when someone's going this off the deep end, and then, well, let's just pretend we don't see that. And, she's inconsistent with things like she went off after the guy saying he would prefer dogs over Muslims or something like that, because there was this dust up about, I don't know, a couple of Muslim women TikTokers saying they should outlaw dogs because, it's not right. It's against the will of the Prophet and all, something like that. And, it's not worth 5 seconds of anyone's time, but nevertheless, so she goes after the guy. He's like, well, Megan, what's the deal? And I don't know, is the guy a young father or something? So, it's, so it is curious why the three went this way in totality. With Megan, I guess it was at first, when it was with Tucker. Well, that I can kind of get because of the friendship that they clearly did have, and had her back when we had the knives out for her and that sort of thing. And she would see it that way of what's going on to him over this and something like that. So that I could understand. But it doesn't explain the rest of it, not really. Now, before Charlie was murdered, he did do her show. It was not long before he was murdered, and he talked about that. He was under pressure to drop Tucker from the guest list or guest speakers for his Turning Point show, and some Jewish donors were so pissed off at him for his stances on Israel and everything. They said, well, then I can't back you anymore. And he lost him. And it was troubling for him. And he was like, and so she said, yeah, I know. No matter what you do, it's like, it's never enough loyalty or something like that. And that's the discussion they had. Well, sure. And you should be able to book anyone you have. It's like Tucker. People are mad at him for having Nick Fuentes on. He can have Nick Fuentes on his show. But a critique of how the interview went is fair game. But saying that he can't ever have his I didn't really go for he's platforming Nick Fuentes. Well, Fuentes kind of platformed himself. And so you already knew who he was, just trying to ignore him and he'll go away type of thing. But I mean, it's not like you have to have him on the show if you really don't want to. You despise him. I could respect that as well. If you really just can't stand the guy to the point that you would never talk to him. But when it comes to the purpose of thought and argument and that sort of thing, and you're going to have this interview and there's no intellectual curiosity whatsoever, there's almost a moment where Fuentes just volunteers that he's a big fan of Joseph Stalin. And that apparently, looked like it caught Tucker off guard. He said, well, we'll double back on that. But he never does. And I'm like, huh? And so the failure of the interview, it's not about Nick Fuentes, it's about Tucker. I mean, when you have something like that, it's like I said with his interview with Putin. He did a better job there, kinda. It was still very lackluster and a bit lazy. But with Fuentes, I don't know. He just, And okay, and then the better interview, well, not by much. It's had problems with that one. The Fuentes interview that Steven Crowder did. But there he got a little more into it because he brings up the Stalin thing. And so now Fuentes does a better answer somewhat in that Stalin's a fascinating character. Well, that's true. There's heroes and villains in history, and but the villains can be just as much and sometimes even more so fascinating than the heroic ones and that sort of thing. And that's obviously true of Hitler and all that. And as much as you might despise them and how villainous and evil they are, there's really nothing you can do about the impact they had. They did have an impact on history. And such is the case with Joseph Stalin. But as far as and if he had left it at that, it's like, that's a better answer. But he flat out said in the interview with Tucker that he admired the man. So, and there, so he almost has the out, like that's the better answer, and says, well, he's a fascinating character and that sort of thing. And, okay, I could see that. But no, he goes into, like, I really liked his wielding of power and his 5-year plans. It's something we should really look into for our country. I'm like, holy crap. And then his next reference for something like that was FDR's New Deal. This guy's supposed to be on the right, huh? So it was a better conversation. The interview opener was still rather lackluster and didn't really get into it. And, was a bit more chummy on quite a few things. Not as totally as Tucker, but really, kind of piss poor. But in comparison, was much better. It was more of an effort than what Tucker did, who didn't try at all. Yeah. So that was very interesting, where it's supposed to be America first and all this stuff, and you're talking about FDR's New Deal. I mean, what's next? The Great Society and stuff, and all that. It's a lot of things about Fuentes that becomes interesting. Is like he was going off on, I forget where, maybe it was a clip from his own show, but I don't know if he talked about this. He might have in Crowder's interview, but people were talking about where Israel's openly talking about, it's true, we really can't be dependent on the United States. We got to, solve our own problems and stuff like that. So Fuentes says, I don't like that. I want them to be under our thumb. It's like, but the whole point is but you said, and he keeps talking about empire and stuff like that. So you're a neocon? So is he just full of shit? and he does it for the jokes and has fun with it and all that. I mean, like some of it he takes seriously. I don't know. Strange. But he's no fan of Candace, that's for damn sure. He has funny takes on her and stuff, but But it's hard to go. It says, you don't really hate Jews, do you? He said, no, but you don't? I mean, you sure sound like you do. So, but ultimately, but that's a criticism of the interview. So, that Tucker was rather lackluster. And so then you come, and his response is like, well, do your own interview. And it's like a child, yeah, and it's very similar to Megan, to where, well, fuck off, well, okay, I don't listen to your show anymore. It's too bad. And I mean, other the claims, and they get irritated. They don't really argue points with their critics and whatnot. I mean, she literally was going at, like, Mark Levin, and she was going on about he's not well. He's really lost it. Mark Levin, he says the same stuff he's said for decades. It's the same crap. Now, he called fire, but you're damn right we're going to deplatform, and that blew up, and that wasn't smart. Because they hooked on. I know what he meant, because he did say it. It's called the marketplace. Well, right. If you don't like a show, don't watch it. That's, you can deplatform anybody that way. It's just a matter of, well, does everybody else stop watching it too? If they don't, well, because apparently, Candace does very well. So what are you going to do? So it's a bizarre story. And it's like, are you really chasing it so much that that's what it put you in? That you said, well, if I spout this sort of stuff, I'll get a lot of numbers and all that. Because, I mean, certainly in the case of Megan, she was doing pretty good before all this. Did you really need to act like you're kind of on the side of it or what? I don't know. So how much of this stuff do you really believe? And how much of it is, but look at the numbers. I don't know, but there it is. Good Lord. Coloring drawings takes a long time. So here's some of the other characters. There's Shapiro, Matt Walsh, and some of these Daily Wire guys. Michael Knowles. It's kind of. Officer Tatum. It's going to do him. Andrew Clavin and Glenn Beck. Well, maybe I'll save that for part 2. Oh, boy. This is taking forever. And so, I don't know. Let me check. Nope. It would have been interesting to see. Let me check the chat and catch up on that. Boy, it's a lot of chat. Hey, Thompson says, no video. Looks like there's video to me, Thompson. John the Beagle, good morning, Doug. Good morning. Pal says, hey, everyone. War is a business. It is and always will be. Spurg Snake, hello. Spurg Snake says, Pal, yap of the morning to you, Pal. Yap of the, okay. I don't get into politics. I'm very limited in my info, but I see how Putin got into the Ukraine war. It's like if California break off and wanted to become communist. Yeah, it's a little more than that, but yeah, it is similar to things, and they were always threatened by the possibility of them becoming a NATO member, and that would be a real, kick in the nuts of Russia if they pulled something like that, and the threat would go back and forth about it. But even if they don't, it's essentially, but the history between Ukraine and Russia is horrific. And so just the compromise will be, oh, well, you're claiming there's these pro-Russians who live right on the border, and if we cut off a strip of land there that becomes Russia's property, wouldn't that be the deal? That's what Trump tried to do. Putin answered with more bombs. So what are you going to do? Plus, they agreed Ukraine would never be in NATO. Yeah, well, they made the agreement. That's right. Said, yeah, that's not happening. So, Pello says, I like ghost stories better than aliens. Yeah, there's a lot of cool ones, weird stuff like that. But to say it's rock solid and definitive, I don't know. But even a thorn in the 80% of the people who are unhappy with even a thorn in the 80% of people who are unhappy with leadership. The Iran population, to clarify. That there's an opposition in there that are not happy with, the mullahs and all that. Yeah. What about ghost aliens? That's true. There could be the ghosts of aliens. Like if the Roswell thing was true and those aliens who died in the crash, what happened to their ghosts? The ghost that haunts my house, to me, there is no such things as aliens. He then laughed and mocked me and wouldn't let me fall asleep. Okay. Fella says, Megan is all kinds of hot. Yes, she is. She's a very beautiful lady. NBC, No Brain Channel, pretty much, yeah. Pella, 100%, she'll say he's her friend. He's a human. Maybe she'll respectfully disagree if that's how she feels. Yeah, it goes a little more in that, and that there's a legitimate argument there that she just passes on. She could still say, I like the guy, we have a friendship and all that. Fine. But this is something that's rather blatant and obvious. And then she just gets nasty and mad at everybody. It's strange. LMAO Pale says Berg Snake, France's first monster. Is that the title? Saint Ranger. Saint Ranger says howdy, everyone. Hi, Saint Ranger. Everybody's saying hi to Saint Ranger. Saint Ranger Stalin. Okay, Stalin didn't play favorites, at least not when he had every 10th officer shot to keep the rest loyal. Yeah, that's how he did things. Mr. 1 in 10 or decimate himself. So that was the Stalin policy. Pillow, it's more they are not under our thumb, but we allow them to put us under theirs, going by info I get from media, which may be 100% BS. It is. Who's in charge? It's Washington. And you can argue about the corrupt natures there and that sort of thing, but it primarily is. This bombing of Iran's nuclear, Israel's wanted that for a very long time. If they were in charge, it would have happened a long time ago. Yeah. But the argument for it, well, hear it out and see what you think. I mean, was it a good idea for them to have that? I don't think so. Pella, I'm very interested in the evilness of people, leaders, mafia, serial killers. You can have interest in things you disagree. Right. Oh yeah, I've watched I don't know how many documentaries on Hitler and all that stuff and serial killers and stuff, and a lot of the true crime stuff. I'll delve into that. Sometimes I have to be in the mood for it. But all that stuff, yes, there's always a fascination with it. It doesn't mean, man, it'd be cool to be that guy. No, that is not the case. Like suddenly, oh man, does this serial killer have merch? I got to get some T-shirts. It's like, no. Anyway, St. Ranger says, thank you, Doug, for reading the chats. Extra word, sorry, Doug. Well, that's all right. James Mason was a good actor.
Well, thank you, St. Ranger. I do appreciate that. It's always nice to converse with a fan.
Somebody add to the chat. Oh, listening to Doug's responses to my comments, I've determined that I be big dummy. Well, not necessarily. You know. All right. Why is it telling me locals is degraded? Weird. I don't know. I guess this worked out as far as doing this almost entirely through OBS, still through Rumble Studio. But I do miss the extra little bells and whistles that the older platform had. And I guess that's all gone. But, I can do my little videos and stuff in OBS. It's just, man, this is starting to pile up in there with stuff, But it is the way to do it. Like sometimes I've already got these pre-made videos I haven't put out yet as Nailsin ratings, and sometimes when I just want to sit here and draw and I can just play those. Yeah, that's probably going to happen a lot more. But as long as I, in between them, come back and look at the chat, it should be fine, Listening. Oh, Pella, yes. Wondering what makes people's minds tick. Yeah. And it's like, you never really know. There's theories. There's things will happen. You'll say, well, the childhood was pretty bad. Then there's the other ones. Well, the childhood was really great. And yet the guy was a monster. That's even scarier than the guy who had a really crappy upbringing, Holy crap, what do you do? Yeah. That's why I like the original Halloween when Michael Myers just had a very normal home, and you only see his parents very briefly, but they're together and they seem normal and everything. It's a nice little house and all that. And then he just murders his sister, and they're like, and he's sitting there staring and they don't know why he did it and everything. It's way more scarier that way. When Rob Zombie did his take on it, He went full like serial killer thing, and still at the end had the supernatural element there and that sort of thing, because he gets shot and all that. But he tries to explain Michael Myers and why he was that way, and I think, because then the parents there were just crappy pieces of shit. His mother was a whore and all this stuff, and he was bullied in school. And then eventually it went too far and he becomes, Michael Myers, the Halloween killer. The original is a classic and better. And that's one of the reasons why. Saint Ranger says, we had him reading the chats. We could have done it forever. Well, oh, good Lord. Forever? Oh, my God. This could go on forever. Well, let's see here. I'll test one of these just to see if it'll play like it's supposed to.
John didn't write his own show because he would have been so funny. Our minds would have been blown. John won. He said so. Justice for Cooey.
All right. Now, due to the delay, I can't see if it played. Oh, there it is. Ah, cool. It did work. Excellent. Excellent. So there you go. I mean, it only took me almost 2 years to learn how to do OBS, and I still don't really know all of it, but that should work. So I was worried because it didn't have the properties that the old Rumble Studio thing had, where you can feed in the stream key and URL for the... Anyway, you put all that into OBS, and then you'll be able to hear the voice chats and all that. So it's great. So it should work. So at least I figured that out. So this was me catching up on coloring images, but also mostly testing out this new platform. So the next show will be EV Mux. That's just how I do it. I know it's stupid and weird, but besides the OBS, there's the OCD. Yeah, it's hard to beat. Anyway, Pella says, you can't explain that, ruins it. Put the story out and let the viewer's minds wander. You can't. Oh, yeah, we try to explain it. Yeah, that's just like, I mean, different stories, I suppose, but as if to remake a movie in that case, And it's like, well, what are you going to do? And that's what he did with it. And I'm just like, yeah, if you can't think of a better idea, whatnot, when you have an absolute classic like that, why don't people try to do a remake of a movie that didn't do all that great and failed, and see if you can turn that piece of crap into gold? That would be impressive. But you just want the brand name of a popular film, and you're lazy. So, but, you know, the Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, that was pure garbage. That was horrible. And so I'll give him that the first one was, you know, better. But, geez Louise, what the hell? That was terrible. But, I mean, he was trying to make it different. He didn't copy the original one, and it was just like, what? Just leave it alone. Move on, you know. Oh, well. The only other, I never did see Devil's Rejects, but I did see his House of a Thousand Corpses. I mean, it was weird and kind of goofy and funny, but I don't know. Pell says, I remember that boxing match, Holmes versus Cooey. Pell, we've heard it, by the way. Oh, yeah. I went and checked it, and so yeah, it works. So looks like it's been a successful outing as far as that goes. St. Ranger, is that voice the little robot from Halo, the first Halo game, the guilty Spark robot character? Well, I'm not familiar with the video game as far as the different characters, and so I don't know. What do they call her? I have to go check the voices. Settings, voice tips. Where is she? What's her name? Ava. Her name's Ava. So I don't know what that's from, or if it's just a robot character that Moody put together for people to use. It could be that. I went ahead and activated all of them. I got to redo the ones I put in there. I didn't do a good enough job on those. One day. Pell, fun fact, Michael Myers' face mask is that on one? Yeah, it's James T. Yeah, it was William Shatner. They did a Captain Kirk mask, and so they painted it white and used that. So now no one even remembers it. But no, they do. But it's a funny thing. But it looks creepy as hell, so it works, you know. And it's much creepier than a hockey mask. I saw the original Halloween at the drive-in when I was 9. They let a 9-year-old go to the Dr. Scotty Jones. Oh, well, all right. Pell, so she was really born Navid. I don't know. I don't know the background of Android Ava. Maybe so. Anyway, all right, there we go. Hopefully I'll get to these others at some point. Probably over the weekend at work, I'll doodle some more. Who the hell knows? And put color to that. So anyway, thanks for watching and listening to me babble and color my pictures and all that goody gumdrop stuff. So have a good rest. Oh, wait, I need to do some advertising. There we go. Movie right here in front. I mean, you can't see it just yet, but you will in a minute. Come on. There we go. There we go. So, indieplanet.com, and you see the address there, and you can get in your little hands Nailsin Comics. You got your Night, you got your Doodleverse comics, you got Etc. Woman, you got Sun King. Oh boy, so much fun for you and yours. And soon, I would like to say soon, I sent it to the printer, Doodleverse Comics #2. And this one will be 40 pages. Oh my God, that's a lot. And that'll be there soon. Likely not in time for Hackamania. Damn it, too many things get in the way, and some things I decided to drop out of it, and others I thought was better, whatever. But I'm pleased with the finished product. So it's over at the printer now. They'll send me a proof copy. I'll look at that and say, this one's good. And then at least I should be able to get directly for myself quite a few copies, and I'll haul those over there. And perhaps some lucky guests of Hackamania will get an exclusive Doodleverse Comics #2, signed by yours truly. You know, that might be nice. I would think. I saw the original Halloween with Friends, says Saint Ranger. Yep, those were the days. Pell first drive-in movie I saw, I guess, the first Star Wars. Yeah, I saw the first Star Wars in 1977. 7-year-old Doug. We had a theater called the Paramount. Well, the building's still there, but it's not a theater anymore. But yeah, saw Star Wars, and I was like, this is the most incredible thing I've ever seen. Well, I've seen a lot of stuff since then, but that was quite the experience, you know. Anyway, Saint Ranger, that is a lot. Saint Ranger, my first drive-in was around 1963. Wow. I never got to go to it. There was a drive-in. It was like outside of Lake Charles somewhere, I remember. Something like that. I never got to see a movie there, though. It's gone, you know. Yeah, and then probably the theaters will be gone, too. Or at least there'll be a handful. It'll just be some kind of kish thing people do. Because I think there's a couple of drive-in theaters around, you know, in the States, just not near me. But I don't know, maybe IMAX will keep it going because it's just so huge. But they'll still be few and far between, you know. It's all sad. Pillow, 1970. You are Pat's age? I'm 2 years younger. Yeah. Me and Pat, same age. It's, I don't know. It's weird. These things happen. I'm sure there were other people born in 1970 besides myself. Gavin McGinnis was born in 1970, so maybe there's more. I don't know. I'm sure there were. It's not that I'm going to meet them all, you know. Anyway, all right, there we go. That's the deal. I will play us out with my theme song, if it'll work the way I hope it will. It's going to require me to do stuff. Yeah. Come on, stupid. There it is. All right. Have a good rest of your day. We will do it again. And it'll be all kinds of fun. Yes, it will. Yes, it will. It will indeed. And it's supposed to do it. It's supposed to do it. You do this to me? All right, thanks.
This is the end, my friend. It hurts to set you free, but you'll never follow me because this is the end. This is the end, beautiful friend.